My boutique was my haven, or at least it was supposed to be. These days, even the soft hum of the air conditioning unit couldn't quite drown out the silence that seemed to have settled permanently into every corner of my life. I'm Nora, 27 years old, and my little clothing store, Stitch and Thread, was once my whole world. Now, it felt more like a quiet extension of my marriage, meticulously arranged, aesthetically pleasing, and utterly devoid of warmth. David, my husband, and I had built a life that looked perfect on paper. A charming house, a stable routine, polite conversations about dinner plans or utility bills. But underneath it all, a deep freeze had set in, a silent frost that permeated everything. There was no shouting, no dramatic arguments, just a quiet, pervasive indifference. That spark of closeness had packed its bags years ago, leaving behind only a comfortable, chilly coexistence. We rarely touched, rarely even met each other's eyes for longer than a fleeting moment. It was a careful dance of two people occupying the same space, meticulously avoiding any real connection. I often found myself staring at the floral patterns on our living room wallpaper, trying to find some deeper meaning in the repeated motifs, something to distract from the echoing emptiness inside me. Lately, though, the quiet had been getting louder. The online side of Stitch and Thread, which was supposed to be my saving grace, was flagging. My designs were still good, I thought, but they lacked a certain spark when presented on a screen. The photos I'd been taking myself, using a mannequin or sometimes even my own slightly self-conscious posture, weren't cutting it. The algorithm, the fickle beast of digital commerce, demanded more. It demanded vibrancy, life, a fresh face to bring my carefully crafted garments to light. I sat at my worn wooden desk, the gentle scent of freshly laundered cotton wafting from a pile of new arrivals. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The solution, a purely practical one, felt like a desperate whisper into the vast, indifferent online world. I needed a model. Someone young, energetic, who could breathe life into the fabrics that lay so still on my shelves. It was a business decision purely, a strategic move to inject some much-needed vitality into my professional world. Any other kind of vitality felt like a distant, forgotten dream, a color that had faded from my palette a long, long time ago. I posted the invitation online, a simple plea for a fresh perspective, hoping it might at least bring a little less quiet into my days, even if just for a few hours. A few days later, a response landed in my inbox. The attached portfolio photos were striking. The applicant had a name that hummed with a certain musicality, Miranda. Her age, 24, blinked back at me from the bio, a stark 3-year difference that felt like a chasm. When she walked into Stitch and Thread for our interview, the quiet hum of my store seemed to pause. Miranda was a burst of sunlight on a perpetually overcast day. Her hair, a rich caramel streaked with lighter gold, framed a face that was both delicate and strong. She had these eyes, bright, curious, and a shade of hazel that seemed to shift with the light, always sparkling with an uninhibited spirit. When she smiled, it wasn't just her lips. Her whole face lit up, chasing away shadows I hadn't even realized were clinging to my meticulously organized racks of clothes. There was an effortless grace to her movements, even just walking across the polished concrete floor, a fluidity that spoke of youthful dynamism, a stark contrast to my own measured, almost deliberate steps. I offered her a seat, and she settled in, her posture relaxed but attentive. My initial questions, prepared and professional, dissolved quickly into something more akin to a genuine conversation. We talked about fabrics, about the stories clothes could tell, about the subtle art of a well-placed seam. She spoke with an infectious enthusiasm, her hands gesturing slightly, her voice a melodic counterpoint to my own quieter tone. I found myself listening, truly listening, something I hadn't done with anyone in a very long time. There was an unexpected ease between us, an almost immediate understanding that surprised me. A faint, unfamiliar lightness fluttered in my chest. It was a sensation I hadn't recognized in years, a fleeting warmth that made me feel less heavy. I told myself it was simply the relief of finding a talented model, a good business partner. But there was something else, a subtle, unidentifiable pull toward her vivacity, a magnetism I quickly attributed to her professional charisma. She was just good at her job, I reasoned. She was good at connecting. Towards the end of our chat, as we discussed scheduling, she looked at me with those bright, earnest eyes. "It'll be great working with you, Nora," she said, her smile broadening. "You really seem to know your stuff. I'm excited to learn from you, sister." Sister. The word, spoken so casually, so warmly, felt like a soft chime in the quiet of my store. It was a friendly gesture, endearing even. But as I watched her gather her things, a subtle, almost imperceptible unsettlement stirred within me, a tiny ripple in the carefully constructed calm of my world. It was a comfort, yes, to be seen in such a familial light. But beneath that comfort, something else, something unnamed, began to whisper. The first photo shoot was scheduled for the following week, transforming my boutique from a quiet retail space into a vibrant, if temporary, studio. I rearranged racks, set up softbox lights, and prepped the garments. I was nervous, a jittery feeling I hadn't experienced since my early days of opening the store. It wasn't about the technicalities of the shoot, but something else entirely. Miranda arrived, her energy a palpable presence. She slipped easily into the first outfit, a flowing linen dress I designed, its pale green fabric a soft whisper against her skin. When she stepped onto the makeshift set, she moved with a natural elegance, taking my directions with an intuitive understanding. "Turn your shoulders slightly," I'd say, and she'd adjust with fluid grace. "A little more tilt to your chin," and her head would angle just so, catching the light perfectly. She embodied the clothes, not just wore them. I found myself meticulously adjusting fabrics, my fingers brushing against the fabric of her arm as I smoothed a sleeve, or adjusting the belt at her waist with careful, professional movements. Each small touch felt intentional, focused on making the garment shine, yet there was a quiet current beneath it, sharp and unexpected. I noticed her quick intake of breath once, when my hand lingered a moment too long adjusting the back of her dress to fix a wrinkle. A faint blush bloomed on her cheeks, a flush that I was sure mirrored my own. An undeniable, quiet tension settled between us, less about proximity, more about the sudden ease of working together, as if we'd read each other's minds when it came to the clothes. My internal world, usually so ordered and predictable, became a swirl of confusion. It was a nascent, unspoken feeling, something I hadn't allowed myself to name, much less acknowledge. I tried to rationalize it away, chalking it up to the demands of the shoot, the necessary collaboration of photographer and model. Professional admiration, I repeated to myself like a mantra. She's just very good at her job. But my eyes, usually so analytical in their gaze, began to linger. I observed every minute detail of Miranda, the way her caramel hair caught the softbox light, transforming into spun gold, the melodic sound of her laughter when I told a clumsy joke, the delicate curve of her neck as she turned her head. I found myself focusing on the way a particular silk draped over her shoulders, not just as a designer, but as someone observing something profoundly beautiful. These feelings, these heightened observations, were new, unsettling, and strangely exhilarating. That subtle hum beneath the surface of our interactions, which had started as a whisper, was growing into a quiet thrum, and I had no idea how to quiet it. The initial photo shoot was a success, and its momentum carried us into a rhythm of more sessions. My boutique, now accustomed to the lively interruptions, felt less quiet, more alive. The casual coffee breaks between changing outfits, the shared lunches from the deli down the street, these moments began to stretch, expanding beyond professional necessity into something deeper, more personal. Our conversations evolved. We started with fashion trends, moved to the challenges of small business ownership, and soon found ourselves sharing snippets of our lives. Miranda spoke of her dreams of traveling, her love for independent cinema, and the sometimes daunting pressure of building a career in a creative field. I, in turn, found myself opening up about my own aspirations, the quiet satisfaction I found in designing, and the sometimes lonely path of entrepreneurship. I carefully skirted around the details of my personal life, particularly David, keeping that part of my world carefully veiled. The sister, dynamic Miranda had established, which had initially felt like a comfortable buffer, now carried a subtle, different weight. It was still affectionate, still warm, but the underlying current felt richer, more complex. There was an intimacy to it that went beyond simple camaraderie. I found myself anticipating our meetings, the days between shoots feeling a little duller, a little less vibrant. Her presence had become a quiet, almost essential, light in my routine. My sensory world, once muted by routine, sharpened remarkably around her. I became acutely aware of the subtle, clean scent of her perfume, a hint of something citrusy and fresh, lingering in the air long after she'd left a room. The precise pitch of her voice, a gentle rise and fall, became a familiar melody. I noticed the way her hands moved when she was excited about an idea, delicate but expressive, painting the air with her words. The ambiguous atmosphere that had settled between us, thick with unspoken emotions, wasn't just a hum now. It was a constant, resonant thrum beneath every interaction, every shared glance. One afternoon, as we reviewed photos on my laptop, the idea struck me. My new collection, Coastal Reverie, was inspired by the ocean's quiet power and shifting light. It needed a backdrop that could truly capture its essence. "I'm thinking," I said, turning to Miranda, "we need to go to the beach. For the next shoot. The light, the freedom, it would be perfect." She nodded, her eyes bright with agreement, a shared excitement sparking between us. I told myself it was for the clothes, for the collection. But deep down, a different instinct stirred, a desire to see what new connections, and perhaps new clarity, might unfold against the vast, untamed beauty of the sea. The drive to the coast was a revelation. We packed the car with garments, equipment, and a cooler of snacks, the usual professional necessities. But the journey itself felt different. The windows were down, letting in the salty breeze, and the air between us was filled with easy conversation, punctuated by genuine laughter. Miranda pointed out quirky roadside attractions, told stories about her childhood summers by the shore, and hummed along to the radio with an unself-conscious joy. I found myself laughing more freely than I had in years, a sound that felt foreign and exhilarating even to my own ears. It was a sense of liberation I hadn't realized I was craving, a momentary, blissful escape from the stagnant, controlled air of my structured life. When we finally arrived, the ocean stretched before us, an endless expanse of shimmering blue under a vast, open sky. The sheer scale of it, the raw power and beauty, felt cleansing, stripping away the small, suffocating confines of my everyday existence. Against this majestic backdrop, Miranda's natural grace shone even brighter. She moved with the waves, her silhouette framed by the setting sun, making each photograph feel like a captured poem. She wasn't just posing, she was part of the landscape, an extension of the ocean's wild beauty. During a break, as the last rays of sun painted the horizon in hues of orange and purple, we sat on a large piece of driftwood, watching the waves ebb and flow. Our conversations, naturally, turned more intimate. Miranda, with a gentle, thoughtful curiosity, asked about my life, specifically about the absence of any mention of a partner. "You always talk about your designs, your plans for the store," she began, her voice soft, "but never about, your life outside of work. Are you seeing anyone?" I hesitated, the ocean wind ruffling my hair, trying to decide how much to reveal. "I'm married," I said, the words feeling heavy and almost alien on my tongue. "David and I have been together for a while." My voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Miranda listened, her gaze unwavering, her expression warm with empathy. She didn't press, but her eyes held a quiet understanding, a knowing that seemed to see beneath my carefully constructed composure. "It's quiet," I admitted, the words escaping me before I could fully censor them. "Our life, it's very quiet. There isn't much excitement or even much connection, really. It's just settled." Miranda reached out, her hand resting briefly, lightly, on my arm. It was a simple gesture, yet it sent a quiet warmth through me, a current that resonated deeply within my core. Her touch was not pitying, nor was it questioning. It was pure, unadulterated comfort, an unspoken acknowledgement of the sadness she sensed radiating from me. In that moment, against the vastness of the ocean and the gentle weight of her hand, I felt a crack in the carefully constructed wall around my heart, a subtle unveiling of a vulnerability I hadn't known I still possessed. The photo shoot wrapped up as dusk began to settle, painting the sky in soft, bruised purples and oranges. The images we captured were stunning, infused with a raw beauty I hadn't quite managed before. But as the last of the equipment was packed, I realized the emotional currents between us were far stronger, far more turbulent, than any tide on the shore. The subtle touch on my arm, the shared vulnerability, it had shifted something fundamental within me. I grappled with the intense, unanticipated feelings Miranda evoked, a dizzying conflict between the societal expectations I'd internalized my entire life and the undeniable stirrings of my own awakening heart. The thought of the long drive back to my quiet, sterile home and the even colder silence of my marriage felt suddenly unbearable. It was late, past the time I usually wound down my day. My body was tired, but my mind was alight, buzzing with 1,000 new sensations. "It's too late to drive all the way back tonight," I stated, the words sounding more decisive than I felt. It was a practical necessity, a logical conclusion to a long day's work. "We should find a hotel here. Get an early start back in the morning." Miranda simply nodded, her expression unreadable in the fading light. There was a quiet acceptance in her eyes, a reflection of the unspoken truth that had settled between us. I pulled out my phone, quickly finding a quaint, slightly old-fashioned hotel not far from the beach. I booked 2 separate rooms, the proximity charged with an undeniable, heavy meaning that pulsed beneath the surface of my practical decision. Back in my own room, the quiet was different from the kind I was used to. It hummed with my own turmoil, not the empty silence of my marriage. I paced, the soft carpet muffling my steps. Guilt twisted in my stomach, a familiar companion I'd ignored for too long. Married woman, my conscience whispered, "This is wrong." Yet, beneath the guilt, a profound sense of vitality Miranda awakened within me pulsed like a newly discovered heartbeat. It was terrifying, exhilarating. I questioned the burgeoning attraction, the moral implications, and the terrifying prospect of dismantling the life I had so carefully built. But as I stared out at the dark ocean, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves, I couldn't deny the undeniable truth. Miranda, with her bright spirit and gentle touch, had woken something in me that I thought had died long ago. And the thought of going back to sleep, of returning to that muted existence, felt suddenly impossible. After a late dinner at the hotel's modest restaurant, a quiet meal punctuated by the low murmur of other guests, we retreated. Miranda suggested we share a bottle of wine in one of our rooms, simply to unwind after the long day. I chose my room, the one facing the ocean, perhaps seeking some solace in the vast darkness beyond the window. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by soft laughter that felt wonderfully free. We talked about the success of the shoot, the beauty of the coast, and shared more stories about our lives, dipping into childhood memories and future aspirations. The wine, a light rose, lowered my inhibitions just enough to let my guard down a fraction, enough to allow the raw edges of my emotions to surface. Miranda listened with that same unwavering gaze, her eyes reflecting the dim lamplight, observing me with a quiet intensity. She noticed the nuances, the almost imperceptible sorrow that still clung to me beneath my composure. "Nora," she began, her voice soft, almost a whisper, "it sounds like you've been carrying a lot for a long time." She didn't prod, didn't demand. Just a gentle observation, a quiet solace that reached right into the core of me, bypassing all my defenses. In that moment, the weight of years of unexpressed longing, of silent resignation, felt almost unbearable. The truth of her words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. The air thickened, charged with an intimacy that had been building between us for weeks. I felt myself drawn to her, pulled by an invisible thread. Miranda, with a quiet determination that was both unexpected and profoundly welcome, leaned in. My breath hitched. Her eyes, luminous in the dim light, searched mine for a long, silent moment, seeking permission, seeking understanding. Then, her lips met mine. It was hesitant at first, a tentative brush, soft and questioning. Then, it softened into a quiet, earnest press. No rush, no urgency, just a quiet acknowledgement of what had been growing between us. I was surprised, yes, but there was no thought of resistance. My hands rested gently on her shoulders, a quiet anchor as I let myself lean into the moment. It was a soft tenderness, a quiet yearning I hadn't known I possessed, a fierce hunger for connection that had been dormant for so long. The kiss was a profound emotional release, a silent affirmation of a connection that defied every explanation, every societal expectation. It was a language spoken not in words, but in the gentle press of lips, a quiet unfurling of long-suppressed feeling. In that moment, the entire world outside that small hotel room faded away, leaving only the intoxicating reality of her and of a raw, unexpected bond that was just beginning to bloom. The morning light, soft and diffused through the hotel room curtains, brought with it a quiet understanding. We woke slowly, the air between us thick with shared emotion, a powerful intimacy that felt both fragile and incredibly strong. No words were exchanged about the kiss, no awkward explanations or apologies. There was simply a gaze, a shared look that spoke volumes, confirming the unspoken truth of the night before. It was a new, powerful closeness, a silent acknowledgement of the shift that had occurred between us. My internal world, however, was in turmoil. Guilt, that familiar, unwelcome companion, waged war with a profound sense of awakening. The kiss had been more than just a physical act. It was an earthquake, shattering the meticulously constructed facade of my life. It revealed a capacity for feeling, for connection I thought long dead. My heart, once a quiet, almost still lake, now felt like a churning ocean. I saw, with stark clarity, the desolation of my marriage, the barrenness of a life devoid of genuine closeness. I knew, with a certainty that chilled and thrilled me, that I could not return to that emptiness. The thought of it, of resuming that polite, cold existence, felt like a betrayal not just of Miranda, but of myself. Miranda, though quiet, remained a steadfast presence. As we packed up our things, preparing for the drive back, her movements were calm, her gaze steady. There was no pressure, no demands in her eyes, only a deep empathy and a quiet, unwavering commitment. It was a silent promise of support, a strength I hadn't realized how desperately I needed as I navigated this tumultuous inner landscape. Driving back, the landscape seemed to have changed. The same trees, the same signs, but everything appeared sharper, more vivid, as if my senses had been recalibrated. I looked at Miranda in the passenger seat, her profile serene as she gazed out the window, and a profound realization settled over me. This burgeoning connection, this unapologetic bond that had blossomed so unexpectedly, disregarded societal norms. It was a choice to honor myself, to choose genuine connection over the comfort of a carefully maintained illusion. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with difficult conversations and inevitable pain, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of hope, a nascent belief that perhaps, just perhaps, I deserved a happiness that was vibrant, real, and unapologetically mine. Back in my everyday life, the contrast was unbearable. My home, once a sanctuary of quiet routine, now felt like a mausoleum, each silence amplified, each shared glance with David a hollow echo. The memory of Miranda's vibrant presence, her laughter, her quiet understanding, made the barrenness of my marriage starkly apparent. The gentle clinking of cutlery at dinner, the rustle of newspaper, the polite, superficial questions about my day, it all grated, a symphony of emptiness I could no longer pretend not to hear. I knew, with a certainty that both terrified and liberated me, that I couldn't continue living this lie. The quiet strength Miranda had awakened in me demanded action, demanded truth. One evening, after David had settled into his armchair with a book, the familiar tableau of our disconnected existence, I found my voice. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my resolve was firm, a calm resolve born of profound necessity. "David," I began, my voice steady despite the tightness in my hands. He lowered his book, his expression a mixture of mild surprise and vague curiosity. "We need to talk," I continued, choosing my words carefully, focusing on the emotional void rather than any blame. "Our life, it's become so quiet. We're living side by side, but we're not truly connected. There's no real intimacy, no shared joy, no warmth left between us." He listened, his face impassive, perhaps surprised by my directness, perhaps already aware of the truth. The conversation that followed was quiet, respectful even, but utterly definitive. There were no raised voices, no dramatic accusations, just a calm acknowledgement of what had withered and died between us. I articulated my need for a different path, for a life that held genuine connection, even if it meant navigating uncharted territory alone. He eventually nodded, a slow, almost resigned gesture. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer an empty void, but a space for new beginnings, for painful yet necessary change. The divorce proceedings that followed were difficult, a bureaucratic entanglement of legalities and emotional untangling. It was a period of quiet struggle, of rebuilding my identity outside the confines of a marriage that had long ceased to nourish me. But through it all, Miranda remained a pillar of support. Her steady presence was a constant comfort, a quiet assurance. She didn't crowd me, didn't make demands. She simply was there, a grounding force, her empathy a warm blanket in the cold wind of my unraveling life. Her quiet strength, her unwavering belief in my journey, became an anchor. This bond, once a terrifying secret, was slowly transforming into the bedrock of a new, authentic existence, a testament to the unexpected paths connection can forge when one dares to follow their heart. The landscape of my life, once so meticulously ordered and predictable, now felt vibrant, full of unexpected contours and breathtaking vistas. The divorce was finalized, a quiet chapter closing, allowing a new one to begin. Miranda and I began to build a life together, not rushing, but with a deliberate, gentle purpose. Each day was a discovery, each shared moment a quiet affirmation of the profound connection we had found. We'd spend afternoons poring over fabric swatches, Miranda pointing out how a certain color would pop in photos, me explaining the story behind a stitch pattern, small, shared moments that wove our connection tighter. Our interdependence became the bedrock of our evolving relationship, a mutual reliance that felt both grounding and liberating. Stitch and thread, once a struggling boutique mirroring my own muted existence, now thrived. Miranda's creative input, her keen eye for presentation, combined with my renewed passion for design, brought a fresh energy to the store. We collaborated on new collections, our ideas intertwining seamlessly, each garment a testament to our shared vision. The boutique buzzed with activity, a reflection of the renewed vitality within me. I, Nora, once a silent observer of my own life, had finally found my voice. The quiet woman who meticulously avoided confrontation and suppressed her deepest feelings had been replaced by someone more courageous, more authentically herself. My worldview had expanded, enriched by the unexpected bond one found in Miranda. I often thought back to the quiet disquiet of my former life, the subtle frost that had settled over everything. The pain of my past marriage was no longer a fresh wound, but a healed scar, a reminder of the journey I had undertaken. It had been a difficult path, filled with moments of fear and uncertainty, but it had led me to this profound understanding of self and to the healing power of genuine, unconditional connection. Our story wasn't a fairy tale ending, neatly tied with a bow. It was an ongoing journey, constantly evolving, much like the ocean we once stood beside, its tides forever shifting. There were new challenges, new discoveries, but we faced them together, our hands intertwined. We found solace in each other's presence, strength in each other's unwavering support. Miranda, with her bright spirit, had not just awakened my heart, but had also shown me the depth of my own resilience. We were connected, healed, and ready for whatever the future held, our bond a testament to the unexpected paths to love and self-discovery. The world outside our bubble was still there, with its judgments and expectations, but inside, in the quiet sanctuary we had built together, there was only a profound sense of peace, a vibrant, unfolding promise, and the boundless horizon of an open future.